PrimeTimers. My good friend Levon Harvey and Ellie Schilder, who can't be here today, wanted me to record this. So let me kind of start a little bit again. I have a roller coaster of a testimony, but my story is just the prologue to the most important story that I have to share, and that's one. That's you. That's correct. It's supposed to be recording me, and it is. Thank you. So the whole story, it's not really my story that's important, it's the story of God's work in my life, and his mercy, his deliverance, and the power that he displayed through my life, and the free gift of eternal life that's available to all of us. So I'll give you a little background. I'm an American. Actually, my mother was Canadian, but we don't hold against her. My father-in-law is Canadian, so. And I was raised as an atheist in Japan. My father was an international investment banker, and so he was sent overseas, and that's where I grew up, mostly in Tokyo, Japan. And I had quite a childhood of privilege. We got to travel the world. I attended international schools with like 60 different nationalities of kids, and we celebrated all cultures and belief systems. And in my family, nobody believed, all atheists. And I was raised that religion is okay for everybody else, but we're more educated and enlightened. We don't need that. You know, that's good for other people if that makes them feel better, but we know better. So I was taught Jesus is just a good moral teacher, you know, along with Gandhi and Confucius and Buddha and Martin Luther King Jr. and Lincoln. Anybody, you know, throw them in the pot. All good people, let's aspire to that, that's wonderful. When I was in high school, I wrote this, I took ethics, and we had to write a position paper on what we believed. And so I wrote, there's no such thing as a God. There are no absolute truths. There's no meaning or purpose in the world. Life is absurd. We're just like specks of dust on this ball hurtling through the universe. And my teacher wrote on it, I almost brought it to share with you because I looked at it last night. He made a comment. He said, it'll be interesting for you to read this as you get older to see if this will be a satisfying worldview for an entire lifetime. And I remember reading those words thinking, satisfying? What does it have to do with satisfying? No, this isn't satisfying, it's just true. I'm not picking and choosing what makes me feel good, I'm describing reality. So I was a studious kid, and when I was 18, I left home in Tokyo and came to America to go to college. And it was huge culture shock because I'd never lived in this country, so it was kind of a foreign country to me, and I didn't know any of the television references that everybody grew up with. And I remember I was in the car with some friends of mine, and we were driving around, and I got lost. And one of the kids in the back piped off, oh no, we're gonna be going on a 3-hour tour. 3-hour tour, what are you talking about? So I didn't know these references, right? Because I didn't grow up watching American TV. So when I was 20, in America, you know, when you come into your majority, it's age 21. But in Japan, it's age 20. So I went home, and we celebrate in Japan Coming of Age Day. And you get all dressed up in kimono. You go to the local Shinto shrine, you have your picture taken. It's quite an event. It takes like 2 hours, I can testify, to get into that. You need help. You know, they cinch you in, and it's quite a production. And the obi, like the belt in the back, it's intricate. And it took 2 ladies to help me get into that and do the hair and the whole 9 yards. But so that gives you a different childhood. So then when I was 23, I graduated college with a degree in economics, and I went immediately into work in marketing and public relations. And I was able to travel back and forth to Asia, and I had a good job, and I was enjoying life, leveraging my father's business contacts. And after a couple of years in the workplace, I thought, now it's time to go get my MBA. So I applied to a school on the East Coast, I got in, but I'll be darned if right at that time, I got into a car accident. And I had to go into physical therapy, and I was not happy about that. My boyfriend broke up with me, not because of the car accident, but he broke up with me and broke my little heart. I remember crying, oh, I was so sad. And then I was looking at my finances for grad school, and they weren't quite there. I had a grant, I had scholarship, but it wasn't quite there, and I was gonna have to defer a year. And so these things happened, and the bottom fell out for me. I lost my bearings. Here I am, only 25. In my journal I wrote at that time, when everything caves in, we turn to our very core, our deepest values. And my deepest values say there is no purpose. So when I get depressed, I get scared, really scared, because there's nothing to hold on to. So if you're thinking like I'm thinking, I'm 55, and some of you may be past that. If you're thinking like I'm thinking, a car accident, a heartbreak, and having to wait a year to go to school, that's nothing. It's nothing, right? And wait till you hear the rest of the story. That is nothing. So God knew that I was not going to be walking into a church anytime soon. There was no way. I was anti-religion. I had no interest in religion. If someone I can't remember if anybody ever invited me to church, but I would have politely declined and rolled my eyes. So because of that, God knew I wasn't coming to him, right? I wasn't coming to House of God, so he had to send someone to me. So God sent me a backslidden Christian in the form of a 6'8" volleyball player at a nightclub. I met Stan at a nightclub. Now, this gives you an idea of my life at the time. It was drinking and dancing and going out clubbing with my friends, staying out late, going into work with very little sleep. And ordinarily, as I say, I wasn't interested in men who had any faith of any kind. And one guy I blew off because he said his grandfather had been a minister. And I thought, oh no, maybe it's genetic, maybe it's contagious, maybe it's passed on, and maybe he's too religious, I don't know, so I'm not interested. But when Stan said he was there with his friend and they had gone to the same church growing up, I don't know, he was a good dancer, so I didn't blow him off, I guess. So there was a point we started dating, and Stan said, so do you ever think maybe you're not going to you can't go this year because so I can bring you closer to God? I thought he was nuts, really. But he made me think, and the Holy Spirit was doing its work, whatever it does. God's drawing. And so one Saturday, I'm in front of the television, eating my Cocoa Puffs, clicking through the channels, and ordinarily, I would not be watching a televangelist, but as I'm clicking through the channels, a televangelist pops up. And I don't know what he was talking about, but these verses start flashing on the screen. And I thought, what is this all about? I don't know what this is about. Oh yeah, my roommate, I think when he moved in, I saw he had a Bible. He wasn't there, so I tiptoed into his room, looking on a shelf for a Bible. No Bible. I turn around, and I'll be darned if this thing isn't laying open by the side of his bed. He reads it? Who reads the Bible? like on the shelf reference, but so that was weird. So it turned out God sent me a backslidden Christian as a housemate too. So I start looking, I go there to start looking it up. And you have to keep in mind that this is in the days before DVRs. I couldn't pause the television, right? So John 3:16, okay, so, and I don't know how to work a Bible. What do? Open it up. I'm a reader, go to the index. John. Okay, John, page, get to that page. Oh, I didn't know how to work chapters and verses. I didn't know 3:16. I didn't understand that. But, sort of I figured it out. And by the time I got to that verse, as you can imagine, they're on to the next verse. Next verse flashing, next verse. I couldn't keep up and I got extremely frustrated. I remember getting up and saying, this is ridiculous. I know nothing about the Bible. Here I consider myself an educated woman. I mean, this may be spiritual mythology to me, but I remember being told growing up, educated people have a good appreciation and a basic understanding of the Bible and Shakespeare because they were so influential in Western civilization, etc. So I figured, gosh, I just had a shock. I know nothing about the Bible. So anyway, my roommate comes home and I started quizzing him, asking him questions about the Bible and what is it about and who is this God person? And he was just not equipped to answer my questions. He really, as I say, he was not in a place in his faith where he was able to communicate the truth of the gospel or answer any questions about the Bible, unfortunately. And at one point I was like, oh wow, I think I have a Bible. And my mother was a librarian, so I'm very organized with my books. They were all in boxes in storage at this point. And I went to my boxes and I thought, okay, there's fiction, there's poetry, there's reference, there's, nonfiction. So I thought, I'll go to reference, thesaurus, dictionary, Bible, things like that. Should be there. It's not there. Well, I found the Bible in the box marked fiction, sandwiched between Catcher in the Rye and Aesop's Fables. I kid you not. So God's drawing me in, the Holy Spirit's working. I call Stan the dancing man and I said, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to somebody. I need to get the straight scoop on this Christianity thing. I was very frustrated in my spirit, and I don't know why. Well, I know why now, but I didn't understand then. I was very anxious. And he said, well, what are your questions? Maybe I can help. I said, no, I need to talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. And he said, well, okay, maybe I'll call the church that I grew up at, the college pastor there. I'm like, oh no, I can't talk to pastors because in my mind, I'm thinking a minister's gonna have white hair, he's gonna have a collar, he's gonna be wagging his finger. That just sounded distasteful to me. And he said, oh no, Mark's 28, he's young, he was a total stoner in high school. He's cool, you'll like him. So I said, okay. So I get a call from Mark, the college-age pastor at the Baptist church he grew up. And he says, hi, Stan told me you have some questions. How can I help you? And I said, well, I need to talk to someone and get the straight scoop. He said, all right, well, tomorrow, Sunday morning, come by my office and ask me, anything you need, I'll make time for you, etc. I said, no, I need to talk to someone now. And he said, well, I have a wife and 2 small children, and Saturday afternoon I promised them I'd take them to the park. So what's the urgency? Why can't this wait till tomorrow morning? And God gave me this thought, and I said, have you ever seen the movie When Harry Met Sally? This is about 30 years ago. Some of you may remember. And he said, yes. I said, Sally's been crushing on this guy the whole movie, and he's not interested. But at the end of the movie, he has this epiphany. And he's like, he loves her, and he runs across New York City, and he bursts into the New Year's Eve party, and he says, "Sally, I love you. Will you marry me?" And she's like, "Why now, Harry? Why now?" And he says, "Because when you find the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible." So Mark said, "I'll meet you in 30 minutes. And the next day I met Mark, and he gave me a book. He had taken one apologetics course, which is about the defense of the faith in seminary. And he gave me this book, and I read it cover to cover, and I was convinced. I'm kind of condensing this whole story. This may not seem like it, but I am condensing it. It was a process of over, weeks and months and whatnot. But I was like, wow, this is compelling. Jesus is who he claimed to be. Christianity is true. Wow. But I didn't believe it, but I was like, this is a compelling, logical argument. And that night, I prayed the very first prayer I had ever prayed in my entire life. And it went something like this. Well, actually, it went exactly like this. I wrote it down in my journal, so I remember. "Dear God, if you can hear me, and I know you can't, if you exist and I know you don't, if you can hear me, I know you can't, speak now or forever hold your peace." So, audacious, but sincere. Truly, I was like, show me what you got. So, again, to make a long story, get to the point, on Monday, July 22nd, 1991, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was 25, I said, "Okay, Jesus, come on down." And if anybody is paying attention to the date, that is 30 years and 5 days ago, today. Hallelujah indeed. So I wish I could say that everything was, sunshine and roses from there on out. But this is when, by the world standards, everything went downhill. On the one hand, I was an atheist. I knew what I believed before, and now all of a sudden God exists. This changes everything, right? Talk about being born again. It was like I'd gone from black and white to color. There's a God. You cannot imagine just the shock of realizing that life has value, what we do has purpose. I just got overcome, I think, with just remembering what a crazy shock. And as you can imagine, I was one of those Jesus freaks, fanatics, zealots, running around like a puppy chasing my tail. I was so excited, got to tell everybody, I believe in God. Anybody I'd ever heard say the word God or church, I ran around, guess what? I believe in God. They didn't all believe in the same God I did, as it turned out, but I was very excited. I soaked up information like a sponge at that point. I began reading my Bible. I was reading books about theology. I was taking classes at my church at the time. I wanted to know everything about God. I called up the school on the East Coast where I was going to get my MBA, and I said, I'm not coming. And I was like one of those, I'm going to sell everything and become a missionary and go to Japan. And I fortunately had some people set me down like, whoa, Rains, hold on. So as I'm reading my Bible as a new believer, I came across 1 Corinthians 1:27, where it talks about God choosing the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and choosing the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And I remember going, what? I'm not foolish or weak. Famous last words. So sadly, as the only believer in my family, I'm the eldest of 6 children. They thought I had been brainwashed. My roommate thought I had been maybe kidnapped and indoctrinated into a cult. That Thanksgiving, when my brother Colin said, "You don't still believe in God, do you?" After 30 years, I think they realized it's not just a phase. But I was young and naive, and within 6 months, I was swept off my feet by the first man who impressed me at church and married him. And he proceeded to take me out of state, move me away from friends and family, and the next 3 years were a nightmare. Because sadly, he was very abusive. It was a situation of domestic violence. And that, coupled with the car accident I'd been in, I developed this widespread, chronic pain that nobody could explain. And I felt trapped in this marriage. I thought, oh, Christians can't get divorced. I didn't know much. I was a brand new believer, and he didn't let me go to church because it turned out he wasn't a Christian. So I didn't have anything. I didn't have people in my life to speak truth. And the long and the short of it is I did get out safely after 3.5 years, but it was at that point where I was really in physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual pain. I was in pain in so many ways. In terms of God, I'm thinking, I've barely been a Christian 4 years, and I'm a failure at this Christian life, So I withdrew from Christian friends, I withdrew from church. I just withdrew and isolated myself, which is the worst place to be. As far as my family went, they're looking at me saying, you became a Christian, everything was going well for you. You were off to get your MBA. And now, look what's happened to you. So I withdrew from my family because I was ashamed. And I felt like a failure. And I felt God had truly forgotten about me. So you know what? I said, I'm going to forget about you for a while. God. I still believed, but it was more like intellectual assent. And I had so much pain in me, and I wanted to feel better now. You'll notice there's a pattern of impatience. So I began drinking, doing recreational drugs, and getting into sexual promiscuity. And as you can imagine, none of these things helped. In fact, I had been depressed before, I felt worse after. Because while it seems like a quick fix in the moment, I felt shame, and I felt far worse, and I went as far low as a human being can go, because it was at that point that I attempted suicide and landed in the hospital. So I'm 33 at this point. I can't work because of pain and depression. So I'm on disability. I had grown up feeling like acceptance was based on performance, and certainly affirmation came from performance. You do well, people speak well of you. And I was not doing well. So I pulled away, as you can imagine, even more from my family. I wasn't going to church, I wasn't reading the Bible, and I felt too ashamed to pray. It was around this time that I was finally diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which explains the chronic, widespread pain. I went to I thought it was a hair, it's just my mic, to a pain management doctor, and he said, you know how diabetics need to take insulin for the rest of their lives to feel normal? Yeah. Well, you're a pain patient, a chronic, intractable pain patient, and you're gonna need to be on painkillers for the rest of your life to feel normal. I said, okay, you're the doctor, you know what you're talking about. He put me on morphine. In the short term, though, I thought, this is a gift. This is a miracle cure. Because immediately, I felt so much better. I got off disability, I went back to work, I was pulling in the income, got my own place, I re-engaged with my family. They're looking like, wow, you got it all back together. I felt like I had salvaged my life. I had wasted all these years, but now I'd salvaged my life. So the next few years were great. I was working for a big company, and then I started my own business, and then I was blessed. I was very blessed. I get nothing of my doing. To get remarried at the age of 40 to my lovely husband, Stephen Sands, who is truly a gift from God. Now, you know how some men walk around thinking they're God's gift to mankind? Stephen is the opposite of that, but he is truly God's gift to me. Truly. And his parents are sitting here in the audience today. Oh. Unfortunately, we thought it was all going to get good now, right? Unfortunately, the next season is what Stephen calls the dark ages. Because morphine helped the pain, but it was killing me, mentally and spiritually. And if you know anything about narcotics, you develop a tolerance and a dependence and an addiction. And you have to keep taking more and more to get the same effect. And I had to quit working. I had to quit going to church. I couldn't go to very many functions. And I was still, in fact, the pain kind of came back. I had been pain-free for a while I was all working, but then and eventually I was all but bedbound and a zombie. Now, I want to stop right now, quickly, for a little public service announcement, because I am the face of the opiate epidemic in this country. And there was a woman I met who did not know what that meant. And opiates are narcotics, painkillers. And so it's not just the guy on the street getting, heroin, what you might think of as a junkie. And God bless them, they need our compassion and assistance, because that is a horrible place to be. But it's not just people doing heroin, street drugs. It's people like me who get prescribed narcotics by doctors and then keep. They're like pushers, really. So narcotics are good for short-term acute pain, but they're not meant for long-term chronic pain. Okay, end of PSA. So God was merciful, and I came down with a bout of pneumonia about 8 years ago. In his great mercy, he allowed me to get pneumonia. And I was coughing and vomiting, and I couldn't keep meds down. and I got confused, and I was so sick I got confused, and I doubled up on my medication. I was already taking enough for like a zoo animal, so, and I accidentally overdosed. And I spent a hellish week in the hospital, going through withdrawal. Didn't come down off of it, came down to a little more manageable levels. And that was sort of a come to Jesus moment for me. And over the next few years, I began tapering slowly by myself every month. And it took years, but I'm free to say that I'm no longer in bondage to pain meds. I've been clean for 3 years now. And at that time, probably because of my re-entry into society, my mother-in-law's sister, my husband's aunt, invited me to CBS, Community Bible Study, at Covenant Presbyterian. And so I went there, and I gotta tell you, I showed up very weak and sort of a shell of my former self. And we began reading the Bible, and it was like reading the scriptures for the very first time. And it reignited my passion for God and for His Word. And I was a little afraid to be judged because I'm walking in there in sweats, and all these women look like they have their lives together. You know, at Bible study, it's like the social event of the week. Everybody's dressed up and looks nice and social. I thought, man, if they only knew. If they only knew where I've been. If they only knew who I was. But they loved on me. God loved on me through them, through the saints. And over the next few years, I began praying, okay, God, I wanted to sell all my possessions and become a missionary, and then I wasted quite a few years and life happened, so let's start again. So I prayed for years and I wasn't impatient. I said, what do you have for me now? And a friend of mine, I was talking to her about these wasted years of my life and how sad and how sorry I felt for myself, and what can I possibly do with my life now? Do I go back to work? And she said, why don't you go talk to your pastor? Stephen and I had just started attending Trinity. And I said, well, who am I to go talk to the pastor? He doesn't know my name. He doesn't know who I am. Who am I? But I took her advice and I went and talked to Doug. I sat down. He was very gracious, spent some time with me, and he prayed for me. And then he introduced me to Alex Riley's predecessor, Marcia, who was adult ministries director at that time. And she sat down and talked to me, and she prayed for me. And I'll be darned if an hour apart, with no collusion, they didn't pray the same thing for me. They referred to Joel 2:25, which I'd never heard of before in my life before these prayers, which they prayed that God will restore the years, the lost years that the locusts have eaten. And then Marcia invited me to Precepts here at Trinity. I got involved with Precepts, and I met Muriel Morse, who couldn't be here today, sadly. Very sad about that. Good friend, and so many other wonderful women here at Trinity. And then things just started to go well when you start like moving in the groove and listening to God and walking in obedience. Things got better. I can't understand it. And then the pandemic started, and that sounds terrible because I just met all these, wonderful women. I'm going to lose these friendships. I can't see them anymore. But it had an opportunity opened up with two other women. I we co-founded this group called Girl Talk Apologetics, where we meet online on Zoom, and we read and discuss books that provide evidence for the truthfulness of the Christian faith, that Jesus is who we claim to be, and help answer objections like, why is there so much evil and suffering in the world? And what about slavery? And things like that. And I was able to teach a biblical worldview class here at Trinity last fall in the backyard, and Larry and Michelle Pribble and my in-laws are here, and they were in that class. And I applied, and I'm now going to Talbot, Biola University's School of Theology, and I'm working on my master's degree in theology. So God is good. So looking back, I truly marvel and am thankful for the continuing mercy and patience of God. He pursued me repeatedly despite my bad choices, my sinful choices, my outright rebellion, my stupidity. And I want to share a picture that to me really illustrates what God's done in my life. Kintsugi is a traditional art of repairing broken pottery. Instead of throwing it away, you take the pieces of pottery and you mend it with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. So to me, this is kind of like what God does with us. He doesn't say, I've had it up to here with you. I'm washing my hands of you. You're in the trash because, you know what? You're useless. He is able to redeem something that is so broken. Whether it was dropped or threw itself off the counter, to create something altogether new and beautiful and still useful. It's not the same, it's different. It's been redeemed. And it's all for His glory, right? God gets the credit, because I guarantee you I did not put myself back together like this. So I guess, how much time do I have? I have some application, and I'm already over time. I will sum up briefly then. How does any of this apply to your life, you wonder? You may not have had a sort of a sex, drugs, and rock and roll testimony. So how does this possibly apply to you? Well, I can think of 4 ways. 1, we're all broken in some ways, right? Rejection, childhood hurts, disappointments, losses, grief. And God can put us back together. The second is pride and impatience. God allowed me to shatter like pottery, to expose. I was depending on my own strength and abilities. Remember that verse about the foolish and the weak? God using the foolish and the weak. Remember, I was like, what? I'm not foolish or weak. So maybe some of you are struggling with pride. Maybe you're feeling at your age, you've paid your dues, you've put in your time, you're now expecting life and people and circumstances to treat you well. Maybe there's a little frustration and anger that your body is not behaving and is deteriorated and it's not doing what you want it to do, and you don't want to be a burden to anyone. Have you ever thought about the fact that the God of the universe didn't just descend in a cloud? He came as a little infant. He had to be bathed. The one who spoke the world into existence, he had to be bathed and dressed and fed and burped, totally dependent on others to care for him. Ever thought maybe it's God's will for you to be dependent on others now and let them care for you? So we may be prime-timers, but God's not done with us yet. My mother and father were 70 and 72 when they passed away. I'm 55. If you do the math, maybe 15 years, or maybe tomorrow, right? I don't know how much. The Bible says our days are literally numbered. We need to live the rest of our lives in light of eternity and make the most of the time we have now. And so there's one question, and this is it. And it's an important question. It's possible, because I did a lot of book reading, book learning about God, theology books, and theology is just the study of God. But my theology was bad. During the locust years, I didn't understand God at all. And I think it's possible in church to spend a lifetime in church, to sing the hymns. I didn't know all those words, but I didn't grow up in church. It's possible to know, sing the hymns, to speak the Christianese lingo, to have good friends, to even quote the Bible left and right, but miss Jesus altogether. I have a friend, my husband and I have a friend, Joe, who, I don't know if you remember, a couple years ago in Las Vegas, there was a concert, outdoor concert, and there was a shooting. He was there, and at that, he passed on his way out, like bodies lying with sheets over them. And he came to our house, and it was kind of, as you can imagine, traumatic for him. And I said, oh my gosh, Joe, that's awful. I'm so glad you were spared, but at least you would have known you would have gone to heaven if that had happened. He said, I hope so. Time out. We need to sit down. This is not a hope so situation. I've almost died twice in my life. In my testimony, you can say, and I'm sure there's many other times that God spared us, angels, like in your case, Roger, who knows? And my question for you today is, are you 100% sure? Are you 100% sure that if God called you today, that you'd be with him in heaven? Because our eternal destiny is not a matter of emotions or guesswork. If you are even slightly unsure, and I can't stress this enough, if you are even slightly unsure, please talk to me, talk to the deacons, make an appointment with Doug. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Go straight to someone who can help you be sure, because you can have assurance, you can know. Has nothing to do with you, has everything to do with God. And it's a free gift. So to close, I just want to give God all the glory for the good things he has done. Didn't we sing that? Yeah. Nice little. And I hope that you join me in humbly submitting to whatever he has in store for all of us in the remaining time we have left. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
Sorry you never lived.
Wasn't that? Whoop.
Wasn't that wonderful?